Peter mentioned the work that we do and starting to do in marine restoration. This is essential for our carbon sink habitats and for the biodiversity that they actually absorb and host and allow our seas to host. Very important that we preserve these habitats. We're working with a project called Remedies in the south coast of England and 5 marine protected areas with a bunch of partners that you can see at the bottom. A project led by Natural England, and I'll describe some of the work we're doing for that and some of the other more nascent projects on seagrass restoration. So why seagrass? Seagrass is probably the most effective marine habitat at locking down carbon. It's been estimated it could be up to 35 times more efficient than rainforest for doing that. And as you can see from locations of seagrass beds and the dots on the map on the left, we're really blessed with a lot of seagrass bed habitat. That's essentially because a hell of a lot of our waters are very sheltered in our wonderful estuaries and bays. In fact, if you go to any sheltered estuary or bay in the United Kingdom, you're likely to be swimming close to or near to a seagrass bed. So it's a wonderful habitat for you to investigate the ocean. And on the right, you can see a number of the ecosystem services that are supported. So there are a number of services that are provided by seagrass beds. I'm just going to say where we have our projects. Well, we've been working in Falmouth, Plymouth, the Isle of Wight. We've also done some oyster restoration work, which I'll touch on in the Dornoch estuary. And also, more recently, we just got funding to work on the Firth of Forth, the seagrass bed, and oyster restoration. And we're going to do oyster restoration work in 2 sites in South Wales, in West Wales. So education is a real key part of what we do. A large part of what we do is these online lectures. With COVID, we've not been able to get out there. So we've done these superhero lessons live online. They're very engaging. Teachers love them. They love them so much that the kids are coming back and saying, can you tell us all about them? Even the teachers are going home and talking to their children about them. And we've engaged over 550 people now. And unbelievably, the lecture online has got 3,270 views. So if you want to learn a bit more about seagrass, go to this link, What's So Special About Seagrasses, and find out about them. It's a great lecture. But also we work at sea. And I think Peter gave us a really good overview of what's important about our oceans and our coastal habitats. Sometimes it's really nice to visualize what we actually do on the water. So we've been working with a volunteer called Chris Cooling, who's lucky enough to have this marvelous yacht called Allegra. And from September to November last year, before he went to the Caribbean for the winter, and then in May to June this year, when he came back from the Caribbean, he's been doing something called stratified random sampling for us. So setting up survey systems all over 2 locations. He's deployed a remote operating vehicle, which is on the right of the image here, which he drops down on a rope from a very small tender. This is his tender that he rows out to the sites on. And using his mobile phone and a contraption that actually talks to the ROV through a umbilical cord, it's called, he can actually tell the ROV where to go and when to take a picture. And by doing that, he's taken photos at one of our most vulnerable sites in the northeast of the Isle of Wight, which is called Osborne Bay. Osborne Bay is a classic anchorage because it's sheltered from southwesterly prevailing winds. Yachtsmen have always known that it's really good as a sheltered spot. So we don't want to stop people if they're in an emergency situation, anchoring for any sort of situation that is life-threatening or when winds are really high. We have never been that sort of organization. What we try and do is find a middle ground. And with the images that we've taken with this excellent work of our volunteer, we've found out that the seagrass is in a zone which is rarely anchored in, and we can actually advise boats to anchor outside of this line from the northwest to the southeast, because all the survey stations in yellow that Chris was surveying showed minimal seagrass in those habitats. So we can actually find out a way to advise boats to operate their anchors safely. And Natural England have got this data, and they've done their own survey work as well. And we are able to now recommend that there's going to be probably a voluntary no anchor zone outside of the seagrass bed. We've also worked in Falmouth, if those of you are familiar with Falmouth, we've done extensive surveys in a bay called St. Mawes. I'm going to do a talk there in January at the Yacht Club. On the left is a location on the top of the pink habitat, which is merle, which is a very slow growing, delicate calcareous algae. And on the lower map, you can see the distribution of seagrass beds. And we've been dropping cameras there with Chris earlier this summer, and a student is working up the data, and she's also using as a reference this excellent report by a local marine biologist to show where the vulnerable habitats are. At the bottom is a link that I did of a podcast with Chris Cooling himself to give you an understanding of the sort of work he's done. Another thing we do at sea is reseeding. Now, what you can do is collect seagrass seedlings in the late summer, have them in a lab over the winter, let them germinate, put them in Hessian sacks with a bit of sand and place them on the seabed. On the right, you see our volunteers collecting lots and lots of seeds. I think we've got something like 500,000. We put them into tens of thousands of sacks and put them on the seabed around in eastern Plymouth Sound. And another thing that is good about using volunteers to understand what's happening with the seas is the videos that can be taken. So using video is more important than science to certain stakeholders. And here's a video we took of the seabed showing some damage from abrasion from the anchor chains that you can see in this location. And if you see, there's a range of influence of all these anchor chains, and then they go out, and then all of a sudden there's a halo, and then this wonderful rich seagrass bed occurs in front of you. So we've used some of the video techniques that we've been enabled to operate with this ROV to use in educational terms to show people what's happening in their harbours. So a situation is to arise to mooring, sorry about the terrible pun, and lift the whole system above the seabed. That chain is risen above the seabed with these submerged buoys. Here's a photo of the devices we've put into Plymouth Sound. We've got now 17 in that location, which is excellent. In these locations here to the right, we've got, and the 5 buoys that you see marked there, we've been doing scientific surveys on for 2 years to see how the seagrass is changing. I was talking a little bit about our Welsh seagrass beds and recovery projects. We've got the Nature and Byth project in Wales, which is very exciting. On a huge scale, we'll be replenishing oyster beds in the north area of the Llyn and also in Pembrokeshire as well. The middle photo describes how many oysters we used to eat, because that is a shell midden from historical times. You can find these shell middens all across the UK in the geological subsurface sediments of our old fisheries. And then we've got really exciting projects developing in Scotland, particularly Restoration Forth, which used to be a really important area for seagrass and oyster reefs. Sea Wilding is another project which is looking at oyster and seagrass restoration in a very sheltered bay, as is the Deep project, which, if you're an MCS member, is you'll have heard about before, which is a collaboration between a whiskey distillery, Glenmorangie, Heriot Watt and MCS. So there's loads going on. And from 22 to 24 within the Remedies project itself, of which I've described a hell of a lot, we'll be doing more schools work in the Solent area, visiting yacht clubs to describe the importance of no anchor zones and advanced mooring systems. We'll be doing further monitoring of the advanced mooring systems and its impact on seagrass in Plymouth Sound. We've had interest from other yacht clubs about these advanced mooring systems, and we're going to embark on a project in Weymouth with a sailing club there over the next at least 1 year, but maybe up to 3 years. We'll continue to do replanting efforts in our Remedies project locations, particularly in the Solent and in the Isle of Wight and Falmouth and Plymouth. And then very excitingly are these Welsh and Scottish projects, which are developing at a much bigger scale than some of the work we've done in isolated locations in Plymouth and Osborne Bay. So that gives you an overview of the importance of actually getting our feet wet and trying to work with stakeholders on developing these projects. So thank you very much.